Okay, rolling. In 5, 4, 3, 2.
We're looking from our vantage point in the fall of 2015, and I'm going to be asking Michael to just give us some ideas, and I'll share some of mine about what's over the horizon and what's coming up, a few things that we want all of our students to be aware of. One of them that I want to start with, Michael, is the book Grit, G-R-I-T, something that I've seen elders have, especially those that are in their 70s, 80s, and 90s. And the way I start with grit, and my first inclination is to try to see what generations have grit. And I have elders hold up their hands and point them to me, and I say, how many of you have ever seen a blister up close and personal? And most of them laugh and then start saying, of course, I did this when I was young.
Yeah.
And by having people to know what it is to work so hard and persevere because they want to accomplish something or want to get something done or have to get it done, it's never been quantified as to a formula of what is it to possess grit, and why do some people have it and some don't. And then we found out a year ago that a book is being published and should be out very soon this fall or early winter called Grit, Passion and Perseverance by Angela Duckworth.
Right.
What do you think of it?
I'm eager to read it.
Me too.
No, I think it's one of those things when we're talking about, the overall objective of building better brains or designing better brains for the future. There are these little things like willpower, grit, that are going to help us. They're tools that if we can get our hand around them and rely on people like Duckworth who are really diving deep and extract these lessons, it's going to help us not only do design better brains but do everything in our lives a little bit better. And so this idea of passion and perseverance are very important. I was curious when you say, do you think that grit is a generational thing, or is it more of a personal thing?
It's an absolutely personal thing. But what Duckworth has done, like no one in the history of neuroscience, is to spend a decade working on what is grit. And by understanding that grit isn't something you can guess at, she did some studies that we think are going to stand the test of time, that if you're looking to a clinical trial of taking a cohort of people and trying to figure out which people have the ability to get through a challenge and which people with the same or very similar attributes going into the challenge, why do they fail? And when she applied that to 7th graders who were hitting a wall called algebra, another wall which was the boot camp for the West Point cadets, hitting that wall, and the third were the spelling bee champions from around the nation who came to Washington, D.C. for the spelling bee. They're all champions. All the cadets are high achievers to get in, and 7th grade is, I think, the one that is the most friendly because we were all moving well in through math and at least could do what we could, and then we hit the algebra wall. What Duckworth wanted to do with all 3 cohorts was to figure out with a pretest of grit, which ones, could we design a formula of questionnaires and what they had within them. They could predict which ones would get through boot camp, get through algebra. And
so wait, so I understand. She gave people a sort of standardized test that allowed her to determine this person has grit or this person, or levels of grit.
Interesting. What she did was to devise a questionnaire and try to figure out over a year's worth of work, how could we predict which ones would pass, we'll call it pass the test. What she found out was that all 3 of these different models, it wasn't how smart they were or IQ scores, it wasn't their grades on school or their grades in high school or the SATs or how well they did at the state championships. It was something else, and she thinks she's quantified it, and we hope to be able to read it and develop our own take on that and put it into some of our teaching when her book comes out.
So they, like say, the West Coast cadets.
West Point.
West Point.
Right.
That's right.
Yeah.
We don't yet have a West Coast academy. The West Point cadets, the ones who had more grit, did better in the long run, even better than the ones who...
The ones who, as she developed it year after year, her test could pre-predict which ones of those going through would wash out, would not get through camp. So it wasn't grades at West
Right.
Point. It was that they wouldn't
Just
make it
getting
through this,
the basic
this
training.
intensive basic training. And now that's being used by the military in various ways to make sure that you don't have someone who might not persevere, might not have a passion or a perseverance that's within her formula and actually make it through.
So are you born with a certain grit, or is grit something that you can cultivate in?
It's hard to tell without reading the book, but I believe it's something that can be learned and that can be put. It's much like other types of skill and mastery. You have to have a degree of talent, but most of it is nurture, not nature. It's how much time you put in and whether or not you're able to meet and then beat those challenges. Once someone has a challenge and they overcome it, they have what you've labeled a mindset, like Carol Dweck writes about, that I accomplished that. I thought my limit was here, but by hard work and by making sure that I am doing things in a way that is persevering, I met a small challenge and later on bigger challenges.
And probably just understanding the components, what grit is made of, allows you to focus. If it's passion and you realize you're not passionate about something, either you go somewhere else or you figure out how do I get the passion about it.
Yeah, reading that formula and the book, I think we're going to be enlightened, and I hope it's something that is as good as it appears to be. And remember, her work was under the same model as Martin Seligman, comes from the University of Pennsylvania. So we've got high hopes for grit as being something we can use.
So we keep looking for all these little nuggets of knowledge that we can fit into this big system. Right?
I got it. Nuggets of knowledge. We're going to put that in the next textbook. Thank you.